I worked with a brilliant coach who really helped me with this. And since then, it's been a game changer in what it's done for my business. And now it really can bring me a partner or a client whenever I want. So I would say those are the two things that I've really learned that have made a huge difference in my podcast.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It's your host, Adam, AAA Adams, and I'm joined today with Ann Carden. Like Garden, she says, Ann Carden. And we're going to be talking a little bit about what you can do to grow your podcast and make more money through your podcast, but in a couple of other ways. For example, Ann helps clients be able to make money through having a podcast by bringing in more clients. And I really want to talk to you about that because you probably got a business. You might be a coach, a mentor, a consultant. You might be an attorney. You might be somebody that has a service-based business. And well, if you've got a podcast, you're leaving money on the table if you don't listen to this episode. So let's dive in. And it's really good to have you. I should tell the listener about one of the many cool things. She's been featured all over the place, ABC, NBC, CW, Fox, but also got inducted into the Who's Who in America entrepreneurship. It's just really, really, really cool to have a lady on here that had so much experience with entrepreneurship, launching her podcast, getting success with her podcast, and being featured everywhere. So you're going to learn some of that. And the big thing that you're going to take away is a new way that you can make more money by having a show. When I asked you right before we started record, I said, what is it that you really want to pour into a brand new podcaster? I don't recall what you said, but I remember being like, we need to be talking about it. That's good stuff.
Hi, Adam. Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on your show. I'm really excited to be here with you. You're so brilliant. So what I want to pour into a new podcaster, to have a strategy, know the end result that you're trying to accomplish with your podcast. I think so many people get into a podcast and first of all, they don't realize that it is work. It is time. It's even money. And if you don't go in with a strategy and you're just thinking, oh, I just want to share my message, most people burn out with that kind of an idea. So if you have a strategy, if you say, okay, I know that I want to get sponsors, or I know that I want to be able to grow my business from this, and you have that in mind, or you want to sell your own services, maybe, what is going to be that thing? It will make it so much easier to have the right direction for your podcast so that you are strategically taking the right steps. Because what I did, Adam, I actually had to change my podcast midstream because I didn't start the strategy that I thought I was starting with. I quickly realized as I got into like episode 50, okay, this isn't going the direction.
Wait. Listen to this, listener. She says, I quickly realized as I got into episode 50.
It was almost a year, I think. Yeah. So, well, the thing is that I had one strategy, but my audience changed. And so then my podcast had to change and I rebranded my podcast. So
what was it? It's Expert in You now. It's Expert in You currently.
Yes.
And what was it before you did the rebrand?
It was called The Strategic Edge.
Okay.
And it's still out there, but yeah.
Oh, so you didn't just rebrand it. You started a new podcast?
Well, we still stayed in the same platform and everything. We did just sort of rebrand it and kind of continued. But before I was really targeting small business owners because I worked in the small business space for many years. And then as I started kind of getting into that podcast, I realized I need to really make this more for entrepreneurs and professional service providers, coaches, consultants. And so because I wrote my best-selling book and everything was going expert in you direction, I felt like my podcast needed to go that direction as well. Okay. So, yeah.
One thing that I'm hearing you say is something that's been on the podcast a few times. We constantly try to let our listener know who's a podcaster that they got to begin with the end in mind. You have a strategy, know the end result, begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey, we all know 7 habits of highly effective people. We don't want to be an ineffective person. So we got to begin with the end in mind. There's 2 beginning parts to launching a podcast, in my opinion. And I made the mistakes as well, Ann. I had to rebrand. I had to start a new podcast because I was going in the wrong direction. I made some assumptions. I thought that I knew. I wasn't as intentional as I probably needed to be. Quickly realized at 50 And I thought that was very funny to quickly realize after 50 whole episodes, because some people never get to 50. It took me to quickly realize over 500 episodes. And I'm not exaggerating. I had nearly 600 episodes before I decided to sell my podcast to someone else so I could go another route. And because of the passion that you have for knowing that, and that's what you got to do when you write your book. That's what you got to do when you get on Fox and ABC and NBC. That's what you got to do when you're starting any new business or podcast or YouTube channel, is you got to begin with the end in mind. And like I said, in the first 6 episodes of our podcast, the podcast on podcasting, it's a course on how to launch a top podcast. How do you get a top podcast? Not just a podcast that sounds good, but how do you get it to rank and everything? And 2 of those things were A, you got to know your avatar. You got to know who you serve and how you serve them. What's your unique proposition? And B, you got to know why you're doing this darn thing. Like, why are you going to spend the time having a podcast? What are you going to get out of it? What is the strategy? Be intentional about it. And so those 2 things are just giant. And I love that you brought it up. In your business, you help podcasters like me, like our listener today, know how to make some money, make money in a different way. And I will say I am making good money through this podcast. I'm happy about it. There could always be something better. So I'm going to ask for your free coaching. My listener, they know that I'm getting free coaching from you right now, but Ann, you don't know. I'm surprising you. I'm asking you all these questions. How do I make more money on my podcast? And I'm tricking you by asking you these questions. That's what I love about a podcast, is you can ask any expert any question. You don't pay shit.
And a lot of people use their podcasts that way as well.
So let us know, what is this strategy on how we use our podcast as a good enough funnel that we're actually making money, getting clients through the podcast and not through something else? But how do we make sure that we're utilizing or making the most of our show?
Yeah, so there's 2 ways I basically teach my clients how to use their podcast to make money. One is to bring in clients, to actually interview their ideal clients or who they think. Of course, you don't ever really know, right? But they have their avatar dialed in. They know exactly who they're targeting, and they want to interview that person to build the relationship. And then they're able to often turn that into a strategy call. And I have a whole process for that. But to really go after getting the people that they want to talk to on their show. So if you think about a podcast, one of the strategies I teach people is the interview strategy. Whether you're writing a book, you're writing an article, or you're interviewing someone for your podcast, those are 3 ways that almost anyone will say yes to you. A high-level CEO, somebody that you can't typically get to, they will almost always say yes to, hey, I want to interview you for my book, put you on my show, on my podcast. And so that is the first way, is getting people to come onto your show that you maybe would never have access to in a million years.
Like me with you today?
Yes.
Boom. All right.
Yes,
all right.
absolutely. So that's the first way. The second way is to think about interviewing partners, people that could be partnerships. They have your audience. You would love to get in front of their audience. You would love to expand your reach and potentially get clients. So basically, you're using your podcast as a speaking tool. Just like if you would go out and get on a stage and speak to, at a conference where your audience is there, you're using your podcast to build a relationship with someone else to get in front of their audience. And partnerships can come out of that. So I have built programs with other people as a partner that they were on my podcast. I've also used them to fill my virtual workshops and events because they have my audience, and then you can give them a revenue share. So there's lots of ways to use partnerships to get more clients and grow your business and build your business. And you can leverage that in just a lot of different ways. But partnerships, and then just your ideal people, getting them on your show, you can get a client almost anytime you want that way.
I'm about to open up my kimono I'm about to show behind the curtain, kind of like one of the ways that I've been able to monetize on my podcast is that way. So how it works for me is I've got Grow Your Show. It's growyourshow.com. This is our company. And our podcast is not called the company name. It's called The Podcast on Podcasting. I'm trying to go SEO. I want people to be able to find us if they're searching for podcasts about podcasting. So now we're ranking, we're getting up there, and that part's working out. And I do make money. Yesterday, I had a call with a listener, and it was a really great call. And they've been listening for like 6 months. It took 6 months. Mm-hmm. Oh, geez. Sometimes that sounds frustrating, but at the same time, it's heartwarming that they spent that much time listening to every single episode. So he and the other guy that was on the call that works at the place and is making him the host of this, he's going to hear this, I know. Yesterday, I had this call with them, and they only found us through listening to the podcast. And their package is something like $20,000. It's like $3,500 down, $1,500 a month for a year. And so was able to bring in that kind of gross revenue yesterday. And I think that the listener needs to know that too. However, I make way more money by interviewing my perfect avatar. So every other episode on this podcast is a solo episode where I'll just pour into the listener by myself. Mm-hmm. And the opposite is an interview with you. And so it's an interview with you and then a solo, an interview with you and then a solo. You've got a podcast. I serve podcasters. It is possible. I'm not going to expect it. I'm not going to hope for it. I'm not going to try for it. I'm just going to be who I am and do what I want and give the best value I possibly can. At the end of this, 1 out of 6 of my guests, which who knows, maybe that's good odds, maybe that's terrible odds, but approximately 1 out of 6 of the 100 plus people that I've interviewed on my podcast, they reach back out and they say, I want to hire you. I want to work with you. And so I'm able to have these conversations almost 3 times a week with new potential people, just like you said in strategy number 1. And every other week, we might bring somebody in who has a package that brings in 40 grand for the company, 20 grand for the company, 15 grand for the company, or something like that. I don't care so much about the money. I'm only sharing this with the listener so that they can see that your podcast can make money. I really care more about just serving people and making sure that we offer a good service. So think about it like that. She's talking about interviewing your ideal client. On that interview, you add value to them. You build a relationship of trust with them. Then that goes to a strategy call or a discovery call. Mm-hmm. For me, on mine, I call it a discovery call. It's pretty much a sales pitch where I tell you what we can do to help you. And then there's strategy calls, which are meant for the other way, just to boost you. And then to have a little bit of, now, what else can we do? Do you want to keep working with us? Getting people to have those conversations you might never have had the chance to. And it's just because you have a podcast. The second thing that you said is OPP. And who's down with OPP? Yeah, you and me. Other people's podcasts, other people's stage. So now you're getting on other people's podcasts, other people's stages. You're getting in front of other people's audiences. And now I'm curious, like, what do you do then? I need to figure out if the listener is hearing you. I've got to get down with OPP. I got to be on other people's shows. And I could do that if I had my podcast. But what do I do when I get there? That's the big thing. Like, what do we do about, I'm just going to write down a few things. I'm going to write down seeding, ? I'm going to write down sales pitch, ? I'm going to write down funnel, ? It says fullen, but that means funnel. I don't know why it says fullen, ? And other ? So would like you to address, what is seeding? Do you do it or not? What is a sales pitch? Do you do it or not? Should we feel bad about saying some type of sales pitch, having a CTA or a call to action or not? Do we need to have a funnel in place? Like, how intentional do we need to be before we get on OPP?
Wow. Okay. So first of all, determine exactly what you are going to offer. When you do that, yes, you want to do something with a partnership where, especially if they already know that you're going to be speaking to their audience, most people are going to make an offer anyway, right? There's always going to be a call to action, but know what that is going to be. So for me, there are really 2 things that I do. I either drive people into an event with me, like a virtual workshop or a live event, or I ask them to book a call. That's it. Those are my 2 funnels that I really use. Of course, I can say connect with me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, whatever. But my main call to action is always going to be, especially if I'm leveraging someone else's audience, is always going to be, I have an event coming up. This is what it is. If you're interested in that, or if you'd like to book a call with me to hear how I could help you in your business do these things, then here's where you go. So that's the way I use it. Keep it very simple. It really depends on what you want. What are you trying to get out of that? And how are you trying to leverage that other business? I actually call it OPA, other people's audiences. But what are you trying to get out of that with that person? But when I talk even about getting, like if I put somebody on my show that is a potential partner, I also want to look at what is their audience. It doesn't even have to be a podcast necessarily. They're coming onto my podcast, but they may not even have a podcast. But what is their audience? Who is their audience? They might have a Facebook group with 1,000 people. I want to get in front of those people. I can build that relationship, and then I can set up an event with that person for me to come in and speak to their audience. Again, I'm looking for people that complement my business. They're not my competition. And so I can now go speak to their audience in their Facebook group, or could do a live together. We could run an event together. There's all kinds of ways that you can leverage it. But it all started because they came onto my podcast, because I targeted them. We built a relationship. We built a partnership. And then now we can start doing things together.
That's such a good takeaway. You mentioned something, and it could feel incredibly overwhelming to our listener to have the gall or the ability to even say, if you'd like to work with me, schedule a strategy call and we can see how I can help your business. And I know that because it gives me a little bit of anxiety. Even though I know that I'm helping people, and I really got to switch that mind frame and say, man, I got to help this person. They need me. How are they going to get to that level without our help, without hiring us? And for sure, they're going to make more money than the investment with my company. But I still have a real hard time saying it. So here's what I usually say, and I want you to coach me here for a second.
Okay.
I'm on your podcast, for example, which I was on your podcast, and I'm going to have my team make sure to link to that episode so that my listener can just go straight over there and check it out if they would like. It was a good interview, good conversation. But you'll hear when you listen to that, see how I assume the sale to my listener. When you listen to that, you don't have a choice. You got to listen. But when you check it out, you're going to hear me saying at the end, I think this is almost a direct quote. I say, if the listener just wants more free content, they can go to the podcast on podcasting. And then I say, if they're looking to potentially hire us, then they can go to growyourshow.com and click on the set up a discovery call. And that's about as confident as I can get. That's about as much as I can get. But what you said had more authority. It had more confidence. It had more direct approach. And I believe that when you're not beating around the bush, you're probably going to get a better result. And so coach me and the listener on how we can use that call to action with more gusto.
Yeah. So the first thing I would tweak in your call to action is you did not really give an outcome. So the first thing I would say is, if you want to grow your show, like many of our followers or like many of our clients have, we've been able to help them grow their show to XYZ, then book a call with us and we can talk about what that looks like for you. And here's where you go.
This is so effing brilliant. I feel like a dummy that I've never thought of that. It's so random. Like, I've got this coffee mug that I'm drinking coffee out of right now.
I know I don't even have my expert in you coffee mug with me.
And I built these when I had my apartment investing. I still do apartments, but on one side it says happiness is passive cash flow, and we went ahead and trademarked that. So nobody can use that term. And then on the other side it says, good morning, let's buy some apartments together, because we would syndicate deals. And on my podcast, the one that got 500 to 600 episodes before I sold it, before I figured out that I was doing it wrong, like you got it down in a tenth of the time, I was selling this mug and I was telling people how good the coffee tastes out of it. And I would be like, Oh my gosh. And so I would like give them the outcome, and some type of outcome. It wasn't perfect. And this is just in front of me. And that's why it's my example. And so it's like, I understand the concept. I know the concept. I have used the concept in other ways and completely have neglected it when I'm going on other people's shows. I'm just saying, if you want to get free stuff, go here. If you want to pay me, go here.
We all have blind spots, Adam. That's what a good coach is for.
Yes. So now I'm going to be like, if you want a good show, and not a crappy show, if you want to have listeners and making money instead of it costing you money, you can go ahead and schedule a call with me. Was that compelling?
Even one step further than that, Adam, is how specific can you be? So for example, I help people bring in really high value clients, like 30K, 50K, 100K plus clients. And so I talk about that. So I say, if you want to bring in 30K, 50K, 100K plus clients, or if I'm talking about, hey, if you want to sell 50K masterminds, then book a call with me. So whatever I'm talking about on the show, I'm giving a specific outcome. And if you want to bring in $30,000, $50,000 clients and grow your business to multiple 6 and 7 figures, then that's what I help people do. You can book a call with me and we'll talk about if there's opportunity for you to do that in your business. That's very specific. So if you could get even more specific, like if you could look at some of your best results that you've had with your clients and you could actually put that into your call to action. We've helped some of our clients grow their show by 100,000 people. We've helped clients make $500,000 from their podcast. I'm just making that up, obviously. But if you could be even more specific, even though you're not saying we'll help you do that, we're guaranteeing that you're not. This is what we've helped other people do. That is compelling for people to go, oh, they really know what they're doing. I think I'll book a call and find out what that looks like. So even more specific.
Beautiful.
There you go. I'm sending you the bill.
No, you can't. You're not allowed. All right. So get down with OPP, and she says OPA, other people's audiences, other people's stages, get in front of other people's podcasts. I always call this Trojan horse marketing. Trojan horse, meaning you basically come in with a gift. You come in with a gift and you're able to infiltrate and, take over the town of Troy when there was really no other way for you to do that. And these other hosts of the podcasts and stages and the other audiences that follow them on their email list or whatever, their Facebook group, it's like they really trust them, and then you can come and add value. So there's a lot of really good stuff. So I'm going to wrap up this part of the episode where it's just saying like, number one, interview your ideal client. Brilliant. It's worked for me. B, get on other people's stages. And when you do, we got to figure out how to do that. I'm actually going to ask you how you get on ABC and NBC and Fox and all these things. I think it's something that I'm interested in doing, and maybe the listener is too. But let's spend just a quick minute. Do you seed throughout a podcast? And if you do, how is that done?
So when I do my podcast, if I'm doing my own show, I don't do like a sponsor break or anything. I will just bring up, I'll have a talking point, and then I'll say, by the way, if you're interested in doing this, you can book a call with me at acarden.com. And so I'll throw it in and then I'll keep going. So I will do that if I'm doing a solo show. But if I have a guest on my show is all about them. It's promoting them. I am shining the light on them, because how are you going to build a relationship with people if you're making that show all about you and they're just sort of a side note? So you really promote them and you give them a good marketing piece that they're willing to go out and share with their audience, because you have really shone the light on them and put them in a good light. So
we have a misunderstanding, because when you're on somebody else's show.
Oh, okay.
And you're being interviewed and they're asking you questions and you're intentionally using OPP or OPA or OPS. You're intentionally using this Trojan horse marketing to get in front of their audience. While being interviewed, do you use seeding? And if so, how?
Yeah, I do. Really, I let my expertise do the talking, to be quite honest. And I feel like if I'm giving the value and I'm showing my expertise and my topic is relevant to the people that are listening, I don't really necessarily have to seed that. I do with client stories. That would probably be the way I would seed, is bring in client stories with a talking point. So yeah, I do. I think it's so natural for me. I don't really give it any thought, to be honest.
Okay.
But I do bring in client stories if I'm making a certain point. Oh, one of my clients, this is what we did and this is what happens.
Do you think I could put you completely on the spot and just have you come up with an actual client story that can show us how you seed when you're being interviewed?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. You want me just to come up with a topic? And then share?
Or,
okay.
Anything that's relevant to what your business is and somebody that struggled or whatever. So we can see, how should we pepper this in?
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things I really help consultants and coaches do is bring in high value clients. So a lot of times they're undercharging and they're just not getting paid what they deserve to be paid. And I work with experts. I work with people who really are good at what they do. They just didn't have their business structured right. They didn't have their marketing structured right. Maybe their target audience is off. And so if I'm talking about that on a show, I would say, I think about one of my clients, when she came in and started working with me, she had been trying to build her business for 3 years. Her consulting business wasn't going where she wanted it to go. And we started working together. And it really was, she didn't have great offers. They weren't structured in the right way. She didn't have real clarity around her ideal clients and what she was trying to sell to them. We were able to go out and just literally, and in a week, make some shifts that she brought in a client for 5 times more in the first week that we worked together. But I've also had people do it in even a few days. And then sometimes it takes a month or 2 months. That would be a way I would seed.
Quick question. I generally, if I seed, I'll try to use the person's name.
Yeah, I will do that. I will do that.
Is that normal? I feel like it's stronger.
I'll use their first name typically.
Yeah, first name. So if the listener is thinking about this and wanting to seed, should they use a first name if possible?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that with a first name, you really have to get any kind of, you have to ask them or permission. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah. What is that word I'm trying to think of? Yeah, I don't think with a first name, you really have to ask any kind of permission or anything to do that. I think if you're going to use the person's entire name and what they do, as long as they're okay with that, you could certainly use their name. But yeah, it makes it a lot more relevant. It really depends too. And a first name, like I said, it's not going to matter. But if you are working with a high level client and maybe you're in a non-disclosure and you can't really give out their name or they don't want their competition to know or whatever, then you just have to really do it almost as a case study. You almost have to kind of show it as a case study. But anytime you can use a first name, it humanizes it for sure.
In the past, what I've done, if I didn't feel like I was able to share actual name, I would just say, I haven't got his permission, so I'm going to call him John today.
Yeah, you could do that too. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yep. That would be more of a case study situation. Like, this is not his real name to protect the innocent, but yeah, just so you let people know that. I feel like if you're just transparent with people, I don't have this person's permission or this is not their real name, that builds trust.
So we talked about seeding. We talked about sales pitch. Seeding, by the way, if you're listening and you just didn't know what that meant, you're just planting seeds. I mean, you want a garden. You're selling without selling. You probably got to fertilize it, nurture it, water it, look after it, prune it eventually. But the beginning stage, if you want something to happen, you got to plant the seed. And that's you throughout the podcast, maybe finding ways when you're being interviewed to plant the seed. We talked about sales pitches, and I love that it needed to be direct. I love that this call to action needed to have an outcome. How about a funnel? Like, for example, wondering if the listener's hearing this and excited and they want to start doing it, do they have to have like a web page and a squeeze page or an email address or something kind of like already set up, or their lead magnet already set up to get the maximum amount of value by being on these? Just yes or no, and why?
Yeah, I don't think you need all that to get started for sure. What you do need, though, is you need to be positioned well so people will want to be on your show. If you're reaching out to people and you don't look like you're very credible, even if you're starting your podcast, you can say, I'm starting a podcast. And I want to just say one thing too, Adam. If you're trying to use your podcast like to get clients or do it the way I am, you have to make sure the name of your podcast is something those high-end people or those people are going to want to be on. And so your title of your podcast or the name of your show is a really important factor. That's part of the strategy. So I did want to bring that up. But you also need to look like you're credible. And are they going to want to be associated with you? So that's really where I'm going with that.
I definitely hear you. And I think for me, the way that I was approaching the question was getting in on other people's audiences, other people's podcasts, not necessarily getting them to be willing to come on your podcast, but I'm thinking like with your funnel, if you're specifically going to be interviewed on someone else's show, what do you have to have in place before you do that interview?
Gotcha. Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, I think it really, again, depends on what is your call to action going to be. If they're going to book a call with me, of course, I have a call link, right? I have a booking link. I have a calendar. So that would be one thing. If they're going to come into maybe a master or into some sort of a master class or a workshop or something with me, I might have a landing page set up for that, but I might just say, book this 20-minute call and we'll talk about if that's a fit after I've kind of told what that is. So I think one thing, Adam, that people don't have to have all that stuff to get started. You just have to know what you're trying to accomplish. And then as you get things rolling, those things can all come in place. People try to start with all that stuff and it really holds them back a lot of times. And to get started, you need nothing but you and just a way for people to get a hold of you. That's it.
Yeah. I'm thinking of it as like a roadmap going from California to New York. It's a far drive. There's a lot of things you need. And what I'm hearing from you, and I feel like I'm resonating with, is there's a level of detail that you need, but you don't need every single detail to get started. It's like, well, I'm going to take the 40 or I'm going to take the 10 or I'm going to take I-70 or I-80 or whatever it is. And then I'm going to go north when I pass this city or this state. Or I'm definitely want to stay here and get some gambling in, or definitely want to stay here and get some mountain biking. So you've got a big picture, California to New York. You've got an idea of a few of the places that you definitely want to hit when you're going to go out of your way in order to get to that place. But you may or may not you probably don't need the detail of, all right, we're going to stop at this gas station here and this gas station there and this gas. It's like, some of this stuff is okay. Hey, I'm getting low on gas. I'm just going to find the next gas station. Like, we don't need to plan the exact ones unless you drive a Tesla and you have to then
you do. That's right. That's right.
I've got a couple of friends who drive
or an
Teslas.
RV. You have to plan that too.
Oh, yeah. So it's like, you got to know an idea of where you're going. You have to be intentional about some stuff. You ought to have some direction, but having every single detail completely in place, I wouldn't even drive to New York from California if I had to spend the time being like, okay, that gas station is on the corner of this and this, and they're open from this time to this time, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to pick up this exact thing while I'm in there. Then I'll get Funyuns. I love Funyuns when I go on road trips. I'm going to get my Funyuns and my Arizona tea or whatever. And that might be fun to figure out what you're going to do over almost a 2,000-mile trip. It could be overwhelming to detail everything. So I'm loving what you're putting out there. We're going to take a quick break. And when I get back, I just want to ask you a couple more questions. And one of them is just any mistakes that you've made that you don't want the listener to make. We'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, growyourshow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We're back with Miss Ann Carden, like Garden, and you can find her podcast. The link is already in the show note. It's called Expert in You. It's also the name of one of her best-selling books. And now that we're getting back into the final parts of this podcast, I want to do two things. I want to definitely understand how did she get on ABC, NBC, Fox? Because I'm curious about that myself, and I'm hoping you are too. And the other thing is just to really know any big mistakes that she made in her podcast. So let's dive in. And can we start with like 2 top mistakes that you've made throughout your journey? Maybe one in the beginning of your journey and one that you've made kind of recently that maybe we can learn from?
I wish I could tell you some. I guess the one thing I would say is when I did solo shows, I didn't always do that call to action kind of throughout my show. And since I started doing that, and I even started doing that with my live streams and things like that, the response has been better. And the reason for that is people bounce, right? I mean, we love to think that people sit there and listen to every single word, but they don't, or they're busy. And so if you only do your call to action at the end, which is kind of what we were all taught in the online space, you're actually leaving money on the table. So just seed in that call to action. So you're talking about seeding. That's one place to do it. Seed it in where it feels appropriate. You could do that in between talking points. By the way, if you want to do this, book a call with me at acarden.com, that kind of thing. So that's one thing that I kind of learned that has made a difference in scheduled conversations and scheduled calls. As far as the other, I just didn't always have a good strategy in place when I first started my podcast. It was more to give value. And I did want to put other experts on my show. But at first, I wasn't really getting clients and it wasn't really bringing me any kind of business growth. It was more content. So since then, I've really dialed in a strategy and learned because I worked with a brilliant coach who really helped me with this. And since then, it's been a game changer in what it's done for my business. And now it really can bring me a partner or a client whenever I want. But again, having that strategy. So I would say those are the 2 things that I've really learned that have made a huge difference in my podcast.
I like both of them. That second one resonates really well with me and clients that we've worked with. Like, you start a podcast, you think that you're doing it to give back. You assume that a lot of that stuff will happen organically, and it does. It's not that it doesn't at all. And we oftentimes feel very nervous or scared about making money through our podcast or bringing in clients or even making the offer sometimes, because we feel like we feel like if we do that, then maybe we're doing the podcast for the wrong reason. I started this podcast selflessly. I started this podcast to give back. Wouldn't that hurt my credibility? Wouldn't that hurt the I word? What's that word? Integrity. If I like made an offer, then I would no longer be here to give back. Then I would be here to get gain, and that doesn't feel good inside. And I like that you mentioned that you should have that strategy and that we learn as we go. And I think if the listener can learn from what you're sharing, like, let's put our own mask on first, in a way. Let's make sure that we're also taking care of ourselves at the same time as helping other people, instead of like forgetting that we can do both.
Yeah. Can I just speak to that for just a minute though, Adam? Because again, knowing what you're trying to accomplish from your podcast. Look, it does take time and money if you're going to have anyone do it for you. And even if you're not going to have somebody, just the tools and things like that, there's money, right? And so if you have a way to fund your podcast and it really is nothing more than I want to put value out there into the world and I want to give back, and that is your purpose, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you are in business and you're not thinking strategically, how can I leverage this? You are still putting value out there into the world. You're still giving back. There's nothing wrong with monetizing and making money because you can make more impact. For example, if I don't have money to run ads and build up my audience, how much am I impacting? If my podcast is just sitting there because I don't have any funds to build it up. Now, that's a perfect example of having the right idea about your podcast. You can make more impact when you make money. That is a fact. We'll never hear me say anything different, but know what you want and then realize how to use that podcast but we're in business. You're in business. I'm in business. And I don't have time to just do things because they're fun like this if they're not going to add value to my business. I would rather, I love putting value out there. I love sharing my expertise and shining the light on other people. But you know what? My family's important. My free time is important. My life is important. I don't want to just do this for the sake of doing it. I feel like you can do both. You can absolutely do both. So I don't know.
Really resonating with that. And I want to say this phenomenal quote again. You can make more impact when you make money.
Yes, absolutely.
I was talking to a friend yesterday who is spending 5 months in Africa solving some real problems with wars between countries. And they're spending 5 months there for a mission, taking completely, they're not getting paid. They're taken completely off of work. And she would never be able to do that if she didn't have the money, if she would never have the opportunity to serve those people, not let alone her clients and things like that. But it's a real blessing for her. And she would be working paycheck to paycheck if she didn't make that money. So
yes, I love that you're talking about that.
It's good stuff. Yeah. So how does the listener, how do we get onto some of these ABC, NBC, Fox, and other platforms? How did you do it? And is there any tips and tricks and strategies that would allow us to be able to grow our brand that way?
Yeah. So the way I did it, so you might be thinking TV, that's not. What I did was get onto their online platforms, their online with articles, published articles and press releases. And so that's the way. One of the things that I do with my clients is we help them get published and get in press releases and things like that. And so they will get featured on over 300 syndicated channels in online media. And so those are channels like Fox and CBS and all of those. So that it even says in a lot of my marketing materials as seen online media channels. So that's how I did it and how I help my clients do it.
Okay. So
now you can get on TV and all of that. That isn't really that important to me because that's typically more of a local market. This is more, when you think about 300 channels across the internet, that's a different reach. So we're talking about really two different things here.
Okay. So what is part of that strategy? If, for example, listener felt like they wanted to do it on their own, or what do we need to know about finding out how to tap into that if we know nothing about it today?
Yeah, you really just have to go find the platforms that you want to get published on, and you have to see what they're looking for at that time. And you can hire people to do this for you too. So you can hire people to get you published. Press releases are fairly easy, to be quite honest. You just have to have something that's press worthy, and you have to learn how to write a press release. But again, you can hire people that can do those things for you. But anytime you do that, and you can get published in magazines, or you can get published on media channels, that's going to give you much more reach in your business. But you have to just determine which ones you want to go to. And then you go and apply and see what they're looking for and basically send in your articles and things like that. So there's some legwork to it.
So I don't know what is press worthy or how to make sure that it's press worthy. When you work with your clients, that you're kind of helping them grow their exposure and get in front of those people, like, do you help them create those press releases? Like, do you help them figure out what is the content that would be worthy?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes. Cool. In fact, I even have a team that will do that for them. So when they write sort of the outline of their press release, we'll get that published for them. And so that's something that I offer, those services. But yes, anything, here's the thing. This is what's really cool is anything can be press worthy. So when I rebranded my podcast, I did a press release on it. When I have my luxury retreats, I do a press release on that I had a luxury retreat and here's what we did. And
it's after, or is it before?
You can do it either or. When I had my book published, I did a press release on it and we wrote an article about it. So all of those things, you have to make them newsworthy, but yes, they are all things that you can get published over.
Cool. Awesome. And thank you for spending time with us. And to the listener, I think I already mentioned this on this episode, but every other episode is a solo episode, and I don't want you to miss out on the solo episode that I got for you, and it's coming up next. I'll see you there. By the way, one way to ensure that you don't miss out on great content that we're producing on a regular basis is to make sure you're subscribed to the show. You need to be subscribed or following the Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to it in order not to miss all of that. And before I let you go, I need to mention, because a lot of people are asking, do you help? Can you help me with this? And the answer is yes. My company actually does it. It's called Grow Your Show. And you can find that at growyourshow.com. Our clients, they call us the easy button for podcaster because they simply have to record their episode. And they know that every single thing else is done for them. We sweat the hard stuff so you can be the star of your show. And if you would like help to make sure that we're editing and publishing and promoting and doing your social media, it's all in one place. And I think it's pretty affordable. You'll have to take a look for yourself. Just go to growyourshow.com and check us out. And by the way, I'll see you on the next episode.